I'd been on the fence about Call of Cthulhu for a while, seen it in a lot of Steam sales, but never been quite interested enough to pull the trigger on actually buying it. But I got the game in a bundle a little while ago and I figured, what the heck, it's made by the developers that make the Sherlock Holmes games, and I'm a big fan of those, so this game, which promises a mystery set in an interesting island with kooky characters and a crazy plot, I mean, sure, I'm in. The game ran really well, there was no issues in terms of the PC port or the performance. It only crashed on me once, so I'm happy to report the PC port is actually pretty good for this game. In terms of the visuals, the game doesn't look great. The environments look really cool, but the post effects they've got really make them look worse than they are. There's a lot of chromatic aberration and stuff like that that makes the game look a lot worse than it actually is, and character models are to stand out worse in this game. A lot of them just look downright bad, unfortunately, even for the time. Overall though, there is a lot of interesting environments in the game, and it does have a cohesive visual identity. The gameplay is very straightforward. A few of the reviews I've read in this game called it more of a walking simulator than a detective game, and I can see where they're coming from. There is a lot of potential here, but the detective part of the game is very underused and underdeveloped. There were a lot of instances where I thought the game was going to lean more into the detective mechanics, but aside from a few areas where you detect, quote unquote, where you just walk around and look at various things, there's not a whole lot of detecting going on here, so any comparisons to the Sherlock Holmes games don't really make a lot of sense here. There is a skill tree, but it doesn't really affect much. I did kind of feel a bit unnecessary because a lot of the game is dice rolls. A lot of the things that you invest points into you can still fail at if you don't get a good dice roll, so there's a bit of save scumming involved if you want to actually do something that you put your points into, which kind of made the skill tree feel a bit useless. The gameplay mainly consists of walking sim elements where you walk around, explore an environment to discover quote-unquote clues to solve a mystery, which is basically just uncovering things, story elements that move the plot forward. And then there's a few stealth elements, like there's a few areas where you have to stealth around an environment to complete some really basic puzzle elements. Voice acting is pretty good. The main character is a standout. He was performed really well. There was a few of them that were a bit iffy that, you know, were hamming it up a bit, but I don't mind that in these type of games. The thing that made the performances a bit hard to follow sometimes was the horrible and distractingly bad lip syncing. I know lip syncing is really hard to get right in games, but it was really bad in this game, and it's something that always pulls me out of performances when lip sync is bad. If I can't look at a character's face and understand what they're saying, it really pulls me out of a character moment. As for the story, it was all over the place and very confusing with a lot of supernatural elements, but I think that's intentional with the Cthulhu style game. The Lovecraftian elements in stories are there to make you confused and feel a bit more in line with the character because he doesn't know what's going on and what's real. In that way, I feel like it's intentional that the story doesn't spell itself out for you every step of the way. The Lovecraftian elements were on point, they were everywhere, they're all over the environment, a lot of squiddiness. There was a lot of squiddiness in the game, and I know that's not everything that comes from Lovecraftian stories, but it is a lot of it, and they definitely indulged in a lot of the Lovecraftian horror in this game. As for the Lovecraftian madness, this was a big part of the game. You don't know what your character is experiencing, whether it is real or not real, and a lot of it really plays into the story with what is your character actually experiencing and what is not actually there. The game is very short, but I did feel like it was a good length for what the game was trying to show me. I feel like this was a good length for this kind of story. There's no side content really here. There's no side quests or anything to keep you distracted. It's more of, this is the story from start to finish. You just go through the entire thing, and I felt like any longer and I would have started to drag in a lot of areas. So I'm happy with the length of the game, even though it is on the shorter side. A few of the stealth sections were really frustrating just because there's a lot of trial and error of what the game wants you to do, and a lot of the enemy AI is a little bit dumb, really, to be honest. It just made a little bit of the game more challenging than it needed to be because you were more trying to figure out how the AI worked how to get around its brokenness rather than beating the actual enemies themselves. The ending was very abrupt, it wasn't very satisfying, and it was very confusing, which completely fits the game actually. I wasn't that upset about the game having a very sudden, abrupt, and confusing ending. There is a couple of endings to go through, which I did watch a few of them on YouTube because I wasn't really interested in going back through the entire game a couple times to experience different endings, but I was happy with the ending that I got. Overall, it was pretty good. It was actually better than I expected, and I wasn't expecting anything to blow me away, but it was a solid story with a lot of weird elements, which is pretty much all I was interested in. Up next is a bit of a controversial game that I know some people really like and I know a lot of people didn't really care for, which is the Callisto Protocol. Now keep in mind that I haven't played Dead Space, so I don't really have a lot of attachment to that genre, and so a lot of the homages in this game to the Dead Space franchise I didn't really get, so I don't really have any connection to drag this game down, so it really was just me going in fresh to give this game a benefit of the doubt. And my honest opinion is the game is alright. It's not as terrible as I was led to believe by a bunch of reviews around the time. People said that this game was the worst thing that was ever put onto a disc or ever put on Steam, and I don't think it's actually that bad. First up, for the PC performance, the game performed pretty well actually. I didn't have any performance issues. I know the game struggled a lot at launch, but at this point coming into the game after a few patches it ran pretty smooth for me actually. I didn't have a single crash. The frame rate was pretty consistent throughout. The game looks great. The environments are very detailed. The character models are top notch. Some of the best that I've seen in a video game. And the performances from the cast were really good despite the material that they were given, which I don't think was very good. I think the story pacing is kind of terrible with a lot of strange story decisions. There were a lot of moments where I was kind of baffled by decisions that characters made or directions that the story was going in because I didn't really think it made a lot of sense. I have a bunch of questions about the story that kind of just feel like plot holes, and I won't go into spoilers, but there was quite a lot of character motivation that just felt like wasn't really nailed down at all. Like a lot of people doing things, I didn't really understand why they were doing them, and it felt like the game didn't really have any good answers to give in that respect. There was not a lot of time to connect to the characters throughout the entire game. The main character you know basically nothing about through the entire game, and some of that is intentional, but the rest of it I just kind of felt like it was a bit underdeveloped. I didn't connect with him at all throughout the entire story because I literally knew nothing about him. Some of the side characters were interesting, but you didn't get a lot of time with them either, so it was hard for me to really connect with them either with the short time that I had with them. As for the horror side of the game, like the horror and gore, the gore was really interesting and really visceral, but the horror setting I felt wasn't really developed enough. Like, I'm not the kind of person that plays a lot of horror games. If a game is really scary, it's hard for me to get through it, but this game I didn't have any trouble at all getting through, to be honest. It relied a lot on jump scares. A lot of the horror isn't really that scary. Like, I just felt like the game kind of threw a bunch of scary monsters at you and a few jump scares, and that's kind of how they called it a horror game. A few other things I didn't like: the camera is way too close to the character and there's no FOV options or way to change it, so you're just like stuck staring at the back of the main character's scalp for the entire game, and it doesn't help that I don't like low FOV in any game, and in this game it was really bad. I kind of had to push through to get through the game. It's really weird that there wasn't any options to improve the FOV. The inventory management is really frustrating and gets worse the more weapons you have, which is really counterintuitive, but the more weapons you have, the worse it gets because you have to carry ammo for all of those weapons. So if you have one weapon, you can pick up like 7 stacks of ammo, but if you have 5 weapons, then all of the ammo takes up so much space in your backpack, meaning you have no room to pick up anything else. So it kind of discourages you from using a lot of the weapons that there is in the game. And there is a decent selection of them, more than I actually thought there would be, but about halfway through the game I realized I'd kind of have to pick and choose what weapons I wanted to use and not explore them all, because I wasn't going to have enough room to pick up any upgrades if I had so much ammo in my inventory. And the game is very stingy with like upgrades, so you kind of have to have inventory space for money in this game. The music is not memorable at all. Like, I usually notice good music in games, and this game, I just didn't notice any good tracks at all. It kind of just washed over me, and by the time I got to the end of the game, I hadn't really noticed any of the tracks at all. A lot of the time, there's barely even any music. It's just this really high-strung tone that kind of just annoyed me when I heard it. Good horror games have really memorable soundtracks, and this one does not. There was a lot of flashing lights in the game, so if you have any trouble with flashing lights, you will not be able to play this game, because a lot of the rooms were just like a full-on rave, and like, I don't have any sensitivity to that kind of thing, but it was giving me a headache in some areas. So there were a few areas that I had to just like power through and get through them, because there was so much of the lighting just flashing in your eyes, which is kind of weird. I haven't had that experience in a lot of other games where the lighting is just so intense that it can give you a headache. The bad guys didn't really have a good motivation for me. I didn't really have any emotional attachment to their story or what they were trying to achieve. They were kind of just obstacles to me finishing the game. I didn't really see their motivations as interesting at all. And the final boss kind of turned into a Resident Evil boss fight. There wasn't really any other way to describe that. It kind of just felt like the monster at the end turned into a huge flesh monster, and then you fought it with all your guns, which to me is very Resident Evil. Overall, I'd say that the story was meh. It was alright. I was kind of expecting a deeper story, I'm not gonna lie. I was expecting a story where a lot of the questions got answered, and there was some interesting lore, because it felt like the game kind of deserved it. And I know there is a DLC that I haven't played that does give some answers to questions, which I may play at some point, but just going off the base game, I felt like the story was just alright. Some things that I did really enjoy: melee combat. I know for some people they didn't really enjoy it. I found it was quite satisfying and had a lot of impact. It did kind of devolve into a bit of button mashing when there were multiple enemies on screen, but it was satisfying when you were fighting like 1 to 2 opponents and you could kind of get into a rhythm and smack them down with your really weighty melee weapon. I found it was quite good. The animations were all top notch. There was a lot of good attention to detail in the animations. The characters were not given a lot to work with, but I did find that by the end of it, like, they were fairly likable. I wasn't super invested in them, but if there was a sequel, I would feel like there was potential there. And while the ending wasn't, anything to blow you away, it was satisfying. Keep in mind, the DLC does continue on the story, so I have no idea if it does undo the ending in any way. So overall, I thought Callisto Protocol was alright. Better than I thought it was going to be, and I actually kind of hope that it gets a sequel, because there's a lot of things that it can improve upon, and I think there is potential for the story to go places. Lastly, rounding out this month's bunch of games is an indie game called Tinykin, which had interested me since I saw the reveal trailer a while ago. This game is a couple years old at this point, but the art style is what drew me into this game. I'm a sucker for really unique and interesting art styles, and this one being a 2D art style in a 3D world. I really like those type of games, and this one didn't disappoint at all. This actually might be my favorite indie game that I've played this year. A lot of people have made the comparison to Pikmin, which I never played, but I can see the comparison from what I know of Pikmin. You basically have these little swarms of guys that do various things, and you guide them around the levels to solve a bunch of puzzles. And this game was really fun. It has fantastic visuals, really inventive character designs, which I love. I love the hand-drawn art style that really made the characters pop on the environments. The level design was really fun to explore as well. There was a bunch of different varied levels with fun little nooks and crannies to explore. I love being a little person in large environments to explore, and this game didn't disappoint at all. There was a lot of attention to detail in the environments. They were all really well thought out and planned, and it was satisfying to slowly explore them and uncover all the secrets. The gameplay is really satisfying. You basically just explore environments, uncover secrets, and complete puzzles with your little squad of dudes. They all have different abilities that you can use them for, and you kind of have to start each level with 0 and build up your little army throughout each level to consistently find new things. And I thought the story was really fun. It was really simple, but it was well told, and it had fun characters with good writing that made it really interesting towards the end as well. The music I also have to mention as well, because that was really, really fantastic throughout the entire thing. A lot of the moments had perfect matching music, which made it even more fun to explore the environments. So overall, I wasn't sure what to expect with the game aside from having a really cute art style when I went into the game, but I left the game feeling very satisfied with the time that I had played. So this one gets an instant recommend from me. So there you have it. Those are the games that I played last month. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you, beautiful people, in the next video.